Yes, that's right. They're into Africa. The French, having been ritually humiliated in Niger, in Mali, and in Burkina Faso, have decided that a coup in Benin is a step too far. With its ultra-valuable coastline, its port, and its capital city, recently adjudged the most beautiful capital city in Africa. Well, it isn't so beautiful this evening because the French Air Force are bombing the army of Benin in their military base. They say that the coup that was mounted overnight and was revealed to the world this morning by a group of junior officers is over. It's finished, except we haven't been allowed to see their puppet president, if he's safe and still in control, and the leader of the junior officers is broadcasting constantly on YouTube. And if it's over, why are the French still bombing it? Even worse, Macron phoned his boyfriend, Tinubu, the former drug dealer in the United States, now the octogenarian stooge of France in Nigeria, and told him to start bombing his neighbor too. And he did it. More than that, he's mobilizing the Nigerian army to invade his neighbor Benin. That's the Nigerian army that cannot protect the Nigerian people from the Boko Haram terrorists. That's the Nigerian army which has lost control of much of its own country's territory to a group of ISIS-inspired fanatics, Christians, Muslims, being slaughtered every day by Boko Haram. But where is the Nigerian army? It's bombing and about to invade Benin. Now, I don't know anything about the junior officers that mounted the coup, but everything I've learned in the last 12 hours, 18 hours, tells me they've got a point. Any president that requires the bombardment of foreign air forces of his own capital has already lost. Even if he emerges, and he has not emerged since last night, no sight of him has been caught by anyone. No still picture, no moving picture, no words on a microphone, nothing. And the people of Benin are voting with their feet. They have poured onto the streets of the capital in their thousands, if not tens of thousands, to back the army revolt. We'll keep you posted, and a man who knows more about Benin than me, Jackson Hinkle, is my first guest this evening, so you'll be very well educated on Benin this evening. More importantly, got to say, no disrespect to Benin, the United States is now in a state of war with Europe. That's the only way you can interpret the events of this week. The new National Security Survey of the United States writes off the European Union, writes off the possibility of new enlargement in NATO, writes off any possibility of American forces ever entering Ukraine, and writes off the chances of any European country that tries to do so in its stead. And that was only Wednesday. Then on Friday, a war of words erupted after the European Union fined Elon Musk, one of the confidants of the American president, £150 million for refusing their bid to try and censor X users across the European Union. In the 48 hours since, X has become the number one source of news in every single European Union country. Everyone has X as their number one source of news. So the European Union has picked a fight with the continent's #1 provider of news. And it's not going well for the European Union. The Russian negotiator, Kirill Dmitriev, put up a poll. What is the problem with the European Union? Should we start again with the European Union, or should we back the bureaucrats? The bureaucrats mobilized 50,000 bots to distort the outcome of the poll, but they haven't noticed our poll. And wait till you see the results of that. Everybody knows that these unelected tyrants, elected by no one, accountable to no one, removable by no one, earning a king's ransom even when they're not pocketing the money of the European taxpayer in corrupt practices. You'll recall the Belgian Serious Crime Squad raided the European Union headquarters in Brussels just this week and arrested and detained some of the biggest panjandrums in the entire European Union, including the previous Foreign Minister Mogherini. The alleged fraud comes to hundreds of millions of euros over decades. Hundreds of millions of euros fraudulently obtained, it is alleged, by panjandrums of the European Union. It is the sick man of Europe. The EU is the sick man of Europe. The most corrupt country in the EU is the European Union Commission itself. They have destroyed their own societies, their own cultures, their own economies. They have left themselves friendless throughout the global south, throughout Eurasia. And if the French got a chance to reinvade Britain after 1066, trust me, they would take it. They are trusted by nobody, except the credulous Chinese fans, only fans in the world, who think that Napoleon Macron is somebody worth taking a selfie with. And he's not even trustworthy in China. The Chinese went a bridge too far in welcoming Macron, but no sooner was he back in Paris, he was threatening China with tariffs if they did not correct the trade imbalance. The trade imbalance is because of this, Mr. Macron. Nobody in China wants to buy anything from you, but everybody in France wants to buy something from China. It's called capitalism. You, as a former banker, I won't mention the name of the bank, you as a former banker, I said, should know about capitalism and how it works. Well, Musk didn't take it lying down. £150 million for refusing you access to our back door, if you'll forgive the pun, so that you could spy on ex-users in the European Union. £150 million fine so that you could spy on people, so you could censor people, so you could identify people that needed to be spied on, that needed to be censored. No thanks, said Musk, who does quite a bit of censoring of his own. And that's usually to do with the bastard child of Israel. But he's not prepared to be censored himself. He's not prepared to be censored by the European Union. And so the EU's own advertising portal on X was promptly banned. And Musk embarked on what can only be called, if he'll forgive the phrase, a jihad against the European Union, calling for its abolition, as any sensible person would do. And he's not without friends, because within minutes, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, waded into the row. He condemned unreservedly the EU's attempt to hamper the free trade, to hamper the business of American tech companies, and has demanded that the European Union reconsider. Well, will they reconsider? If they reconsider, they're only confirming who is the daddy. And it ain't Macron, it ain't von der Leyen, it ain't Callas. The daddy is in Washington. If they don't reconsider and abolish the fine, the American administration itself will go to war with them. If they're lucky, it will not be a hot war. But the United States has many levers that they can use against the European Union, composed as it is of some of the most failing societies, failing countries on planet Earth. Countries that are in a slough of despond. Germany, which just introduced conscription, the first member of the European Union so to do in this crisis of NATO versus Russia. The French people, the British people who are not in the EU but might as well be. We've done nothing good with the Brexit that we worked so hard to achieve, and we are now shadowing every single move of the European Commission, except when we are doing more, worse, and faster and harder. So the peoples of the European continent, including Britain, are in this slough of despond, despair. They look at their societies and they don't recognize them as the countries that they grew up in. They don't recognize a Europe that only a few years ago, under Borrell, was claiming to be the garden and describing the rest of the world as the jungle. And now they see that the garden is ruled by the gargoyles within. Now they can see that the people in charge of European destiny are not fit to run an escargot stall. They can see the failing, fading, flailing leaders, most of them almost down to double digits to single digits. All of them are in double digits. All of them are less than 20, but most of them are hovering around 10% of public opinion approval in their countries. So, it's never been truer, what I've been saying to you for years, that the sun is rising in the east, and it sure is setting fast in the west. And of course, that's before we come to the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war is now motoring to a conclusion, brokered by a right-wing Republican president, Donald Trump, and the Russian Federation itself. Ukraine are not even at the table. The European Union have been banned from the table. At least Zelensky will get allowed to come to the table to sign the final agreement, but the Europeans will not. So they have spent hundreds of billions of euros and pounds in a Ukraine war that is about to end without anybody giving them the time of day, without so much as a by your leave. How's that for a record of failure? The Russian armed forces are now advancing at such a pace you can't keep track of them. I used to send out, retweet military maps of the front as it changed. For a long time, not nearly enough of a change. It's now the case that the map is no longer relevant or valid or applicable the moment that it is drawn. Before the ink is dry on the latest military maps, Russia has advanced, and substantially advanced still further. It's only the first week of December. The Russians in the Zaporizhia region have advanced by 85 square kilometers. And that's just in that one region. Right across a 1,000-mile front, the Ukrainian forces are deserting, are surrendering, are escaping, and so they should, and I hope that they will in increasing numbers. Who wants to be the last man to die for the chiselling little crook of Kiev? Zelensky, who's only measuring the aeroplane he's going to escape from and with, to see how much of his ill-gotten gains he can cram into the hold. They are revealed to be the criminals that we said they were right from the start. And the New York Times, that called us Putin apologists, reading Putin speaking notes, being mouthpieces for the Kremlin. The New York Times is saying exactly this day what I've been saying to you these years. The Economist, the Financial Times, the Telegraph even, and even Rupert Murdoch's Times are all telling you the war is lost, and it's been lost not just from without, but from within. The corruption of the Zelensky regime has destroyed any possibility of a state of Ukraine of any kind with any borders emerging from this bloody imbroglio that should never have started in the first place back in 2014. And the vultures are hovering. Did you know that there never was a Ukraine? Did you know that the USSR created Ukraine, made it a constituent republic of the Soviet Union, took other people's territory and gave it to that artificial state of Ukraine? Poland owned for centuries the western part of Ukraine. Lvov, if you've ever been there, is as obviously Polish a city, and the language being spoken there is Polish. The Carpathians were stolen from Hungary. Other parts were stolen from Romania. By the way, whatever happened to those Ukrainian rent boys that set fire to the Prime Minister's houses and cars? Why is nobody paying any attention to that case? Why has it been kicked into the summer of next year before it comes to trial? And why is nobody investigating just who these men were and what their relationship to the British Prime Minister was? If you know anything about this case, you only know it from me. And that tells you the liars that have been lying to you about Ukraine right from the beginning are continuing now, most of them, to be stumm, as the Churchill of the 21st century will be lucky to escape prison, be lucky to escape in an airplane. So I say again, who wants to be the last man to die for Volodymyr Zelensky? Not many takers for that one. I'll be right back. Stay tuned.